My boots! My ancestral star-woven +2 agility suede boots. They are currently sharing an ecosystem with a leech the size of a quiver.
Technically, it's not a swamp. It's a high-humidity foliage basin. And according to the spatial routing algorithm, this was the most mathematically efficient shortcut.
Efficient? Ye teleported us into a bog! Do you know how many movement points it takes to drag chainmail through waist-deep sludge? All of them! We have 0 left!
Hey guys, good news! I found the bottom!
Look, the ley lines shifted. Dimension Door has a cooldown protocol. We simply have to walk to the edge of the hex.
Can I ride on the elf's shoulders? I think the leeches are organizing into a rudimentary phalanx.
If you so much as perceive my shoulders, Goblin, I will ensure you experience the afterlife before the water reaches your chin.
I think I see the light! Run! Faster!
So, this is the illustrious Heroes of Might and Magic, is it? Let's see if it's as impressive as my presence demands.
It already feels like home. Kinda like our world. Dragons and elves running about. Hey, wait a minute. Where are the dwarfs? Did they all sneak to drink or something? Can't have a proper adventure without us.
The game is still in development, so maybe those things will show up later if the stars align and the dragons don't get distracted. Let's begin the review before my creditors start breathing down my neck like a particularly grumpy basilisk.
Very well. Let us proceed by the traditional route. Graphics and design. I must confess, with considerable reluctance, that the artisans behind Olden Era have finally crafted a continent worthy of my moisturizer. It is, against all probability, an actually impressive piece of work.
Aye, the global map's a fine sight, I'll give it that. You can see the bloodline of Heroes of Might and Magic 3 all over it. Same strong bones, same proper feel, same kind of world that makes you want to keep marching just to see what's over the next hill. That's the best part of it, really. It goes back to the roots instead of trying to be too clever for its own good. It's clean, colourful, and easy on the eyes. The sort of map a warrior can actually enjoy looking at without needing some wizard beside him to explain what in blazes he's supposed to be seeing.
Since we are adding something of actual value to the discussion, yes, the global map is remarkably well done. It is rich with small details, the sort that lesser minds might overlook, but which give the world its texture, charm, and sense of life. The animations, too, are impressively smooth. Units, objects, and environmental elements all move with a pleasing elegance, rather than jolting about like some badly enchanted cart. Verily, each unit is a marvel unto itself, bearing a uniqueness most profound. The variation amongst them is vast, each crafted with its own distinct visage and essence, a tapestry of diversity that brings life to the very battlefield.
Heh, all right. Now for the bad stuff. Can't just keep saying everything's shiny and pretty, or people start thinking we've been paid in gold and snack meat. For some folks, the graphics might feel a bit downgraded compared to the older games in the series. You know, not every unit looks packed with tiny little details, or that super crisp, high-resolution fancy stuff people like to zoom in on and stare at for hours. Some of them look a bit simpler than expected. And yeah, depending on what kind of look you like, the whole thing can feel kinda cartoonish too. Not bad, just softer, brighter, less gritty maybe. If someone's personal taste leans more toward darker or more detailed fantasy visuals, this style might not hit 'em quite as hard.
Aye, and here's another downgrade, at least in my eyes. The faction design. Now, don't get me wrong, I know full well every Heroes of Might and Magic game has its own style, and fans have been arguing over which one did it best since before half the taverns in the realm were built. But after trying all the factions and looking over what each of them brings to the table, I can't honestly say there's one that truly grabs me. None of them has that spark, that look, that feel, that bit of identity that makes me go, aye, that's the one, that's my banner. They're not awful, mind ye. It's not that the designs are bad forged or broken. It's just that none of them really strikes the iron in my chest. Nothing clicks, nothing sticks. And for a game like this, where factions are meant to be the heart of the whole blasted thing, that's a bit of a disappointment. From a gameplay point of view, it follows the good old Heroes of Might and Magic 3 formula. And that's exactly why it'll sit well with series veterans. Ye hire troops each week, gather resources, build up your town, and use all that to recruit even stronger troops. Simple, solid, and proven. There is no need to overcomplicate it with fancy nonsense. It knows what made the old games work, and it sticks to that foundation. So, for long-time fans of the series, that's likely to be one of its strongest points. It feels familiar in the best possible way, like coming back to a well-forged hall that still stands strong.
Allow me to add a necessary point of clarification to that rather basic summary. Its mechanical lineage does not stop at the Third Era. It judiciously incorporates some of the more refined systems from Heroes of Might and Magic 5 as well. Most notably, we see this in the architecture of the unit progression. Rather than a simple linear enhancement, the game offers a bifurcated upgrade tree, meaning there are two distinct evolutionary paths for every creature. Sounds similar? This injects a highly appreciated layer of tactical diversity into the proceedings. It allows those of us with actual strategic intellect to adapt and tailor our forces to the specific variables of the battlefield.
If I may direct our attention to the true triumph of this system, the magic enhancement mechanics. Through the expenditure of alchemy dust, one can elevate any spell across 5 distinct tiers of arcane mastery. Naturally, this assumes you have actually managed to collect enough of the dust, rather than squandering it on whatever crude baubles the dwarf finds amusing. This dust is an entirely new, brilliantly versatile resource. It is the lifeblood of a refined strategy, used for everything from enchanting artifacts and empowering spells to upgrading your pathetic little mud huts. It allows a sophisticated commander, meaning me, to completely shift the focus of a campaign toward true arcane supremacy, rather than simply relying on who can swing a piece of sharpened iron the hardest.
Anyway, enough of the happy stuff. Let's move on to the negatives. We actually get way too strong, way too fast. Like, after a few in-game weeks, our army gets so ridiculous that most of the monsters on the global map just take one look at us and run away.
Aye, I'll agree with the green lad there. And we haven't even brought up the enemy commanders yet, if you can even call them that. The so-called AI on these rivals has rocks for brains, and not the good sturdy kind either. Half the time these daft fools march right up to us with a pathetic, half-baked handful of troops, and just blatantly smash themselves to bits against our shields. It makes winning insultingly easy. And it's no rare blunder or a one-off tavern tale. It happens constantly. The enemy never actually builds up a proper, world-shaking army to give us a real fight.
And let us not ignore the glaring hypocrisy of our brilliant new resource. The very same alchemy dust that I was so generously praising earlier quickly becomes a profound irritant as the campaign drags on. You see, in infinite wisdom, was decided that this dust must be used for absolutely every significant improvement in the game. Yet they dole it out with the agonizing reluctance of a miser hoarding his last gemstone. You simply do not acquire enough of it to fuel a proper arcane arsenal.
It seems that by so faithfully recreating the magical and architectural triumphs of the Third and Fifth eras, the developers have also flawlessly resurrected their most mathematically infuriating flaws. The entire geopolitical reality of this game revolves around consolidating every single creature you own into one massive, terrifying blob of critical mass. And if you lose that main army, well, statistically speaking, your remaining tactical options become purely theoretical. There is nothing you can do. Even worse, the combat equations are violently unforgiving. A skirmish between two armies with a microscopic power difference doesn't end in a nuanced, strategic withdrawal. It ends in the absolute, subatomic obliteration of the slightly weaker force. And if, heaven forbid, or rather your hero, fails to cast Flee or Surrender before that final catastrophic turn, well, you might as well throw your grimoire into a campfire and restart the entire campaign from day one.
Let me tell you, I'm mighty fond of the story and campaign in this one. We're back on the continent of Jadam. And what's more, it's a prequel. We're seeing the world before all those cataclysms that shaped the later times. It's a clever weave, mixing the old lore of Enroth and Arathia into a fresh, non-linear campaign. And by the beard of my ancestors, your choices actually matter, changing the political landscape in ways that any sharp-minded tactician would find downright satisfying.
A rare, almost unsettling moment of agreement. I must admit, I found the campaign structure surprisingly acceptable. I was particularly pleased to see that one must actually earn faction reputation. It is a delightfully proper system. Furthermore, the fact that our decisions on the global map actively dictate which heroes or factions we will be allied with, or forced to endure, in subsequent missions, is a masterstroke. It adds a marvelous layer of consequence to the narrative. It means I am not merely subjected to a random assortment of unwashed mercenaries, but can actively curate my company based on my own impeccable judgment.
Naturally, I must point out that the campaign is currently in early access, meaning it is technically incomplete. However, from an analytical perspective, this is barely a detriment. The foundation they have constructed is exceptionally solid. The narrative architecture is in place, the variables are clearly defined, and the overarching thesis of the story is highly engaging. What is lacking is merely the final data points, the closing chapters. but the methodology they have established thus far is undeniably robust.
And finally, we must address the music. The auditory experience is, frankly, magnificent. The composers have wisely chosen to remake roughly half of the soundtrack from the older, unquestionably superior eras of the series. For those of us who appreciate classical acoustic perfection, it strikes with a profound, almost devastating wave of nostalgia. A poignant reminder of a time when the world was much more civilized.
And don't forget the voices. People actually talk in the campaign. Sure, it's not totally finished yet, but it's already amazing. Really pulls you into the story, and the sound effects are perfect too. No complaints from me. You can hear the big shiny knights clanking around in their heavy armor when they walk. And the attack effects? Chef's kiss. You really feel the impact.
I must concede they have executed this brilliantly. A truly masterful orchestration. It provides the perfect, majestic accompaniment for standing elegantly on a hilltop, bathed in volumetric lighting, while the rest of you blunder face first into the mud.
Where is my book? Ah, here it is. Say what you will about my occasional teleportation miscalculations, but my final mathematical analysis is that I thoroughly enjoyed the experience, even in its current, uncalibrated early access state. The fundamental algorithms and mechanical foundations are exceptionally solid.
Aye, I'll say this much while ye tinker with your sparkling math curves. The game feels fully forged already. Nothing half-hammered or flimsy about it. I love that it marches right back down the old Heroes of Might and Magic paths. Proper resource hoarding, proper town building, proper grudges. The only real negatives are that they still need to hammer out a few of those unit designs. But other than that bit of required polish, the game's solid as bedrock in my opinion.
I, for one, actually enjoyed the spell enhancement system. It is exceptionally refined. Of course, this assumes you can actually acquire enough alchemy dust to fuel it, rather than having to ration it like some destitute hedge mage. Which really wouldn't be an issue if the matches weren't concluded with such agonizing, uncultured haste.
Yeah, I guess we'll put the alchemy dust in the good category. Because, after all, the game is still early access. They can always fix the dust drops later. Oh, and one more thing. The AI really needs some more work. I mean, I'm honored that the enemy heroes keep sending small batches of troops to just sprint directly onto our swords, but it gets kinda predictable.
Ah, so it appears everyone has had their moment to conjure words. And lo, the magical portal stands ready. As for me, the great and wise wizard, I shall simply add this. Heroes Olden Era is a surprisingly solid spell of a game, even in this early access incantation. The developers, bless their industrious robes, are positively bubbling with motivation, promising to keep brewing improvements. So, with a flick of my wand, I give it my grandest seal of approval, and yes, I heartily recommend it to all lovers of the mystical 4X genre. Now, who's got a potion for celebratory ale?
Can't wait to get me hands on a proper ale.
Still don't understand why we live so early.